Terry says it has struck more than 1,000 targets in the Gaza Strip overnight, as rockets continue to be fired at Israel from Gaza. The army added it was still battling Hamas gunmen in several locations inside Israel. More than 1,000 people are confirmed dead on both sides since Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel on Saturday. Israel says it is targeting sites belonging to Palestinian militant Islamist groups Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Both are regarded as terrorist organizations by the EU, the US, and others. Since Saturday's massive unexpected assault by Hamas, more than 700 Israelis have died and dozens are being held hostage, while over 400 Palestinians have been killed. I'm joined now by our correspondent Rebecca Ritters, who joins us from the city of Ashkelon in southern Israel. Rebecca, what can you tell us about the fighting that's still ongoing inside Israel between the army and Hamas gunmen?
Michael, we're actually outside the city of Ashkelon, closer to the Gaza border. We're about 8 kilometers from the Gaza border. Fighting has been continuing overnight. Behind me, you can probably see some plumes of smoke. That is inside Gaza from what was either an airstrike or an artillery strike. Pretty much for most of the night, the Israeli military has been continuing its strikes on Hamas targets inside the Gaza Strip. You mentioned that number of 1,000 targets, but when I spoke to the military this morning, they said it's really not much point to talk about those numbers at this stage. The scale and scope of this conflict is like nothing that we've seen before when it comes to Gaza and Israel wars, that this is changed the paradigm. So I'm standing in this field from here around the perimeter of Gaza. For about an 80-kilometer radius, there are tanks stationed around the whole perimeter, and they're firing artillery rounds also onto Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip. Now, also, you can probably see behind me, there's positioning some troop carriers and other military hardware here. These are for preparation purposes, the military trying to get on the front foot after the surprise attack and being caught off guard. They are now preparing for what Benjamin Netanyahu has warned could be very, very tough weeks ahead.
Rebecca, we're hearing the U.S. is providing support. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the US is sending an aircraft carrier to be stationed in the Mediterranean Sea in support, a show of support, but also an act of deterrence and a preparatory measure as well. The military did confirm that this morning. The State Department, the US State Department, has also confirmed that, and that should be coming within the next few days or within the next week. Now, that's to support. The military said this morning also that they would be more focused on other threats, and by other threats, he vaguely made that comment, made that statement, but referring to threats from the north, from Hezbollah, or perhaps even Iran. It's there more as a deterrent measure, and of course, if this does escalate, then they'll be able to assist.
Do stay with us, Rebecca. We want to give our viewers a closer look at another topic. As we've heard, the Hamas militants abducted dozens of people during their incursion. They were mainly Israelis, but also included a number of foreign nationals and also women, children, and the elderly.
Yoni Asher is living a nightmare. His wife and 2 young daughters are among those kidnapped by Hamas militants and taken over the border into Gaza. He identified them in a video widely circulated on social media. They were visiting his mother-in-law at a kibbutz near Gaza when Palestinian militants surged across the Israeli border on Saturday.
During the morning, I contacted my wife, and she told me on the phone that there are terrorists inside the house.
That was the last time they spoke. He doesn't want these to be the last images he has of his family.
It's not simple to know that your 2 babies and your wife, your entire family, the most precious thing you have, is captive. But trying to be positive, and I'm trying to believe that something will happen, and somehow my country, Israel, my Prime Minister, My government will do something to bring them back as soon as possible.
Another viral video shows a distraught young woman driven away on a motorbike by fighters while her partner is marched away by attackers, his hands tied behind his back. The couple had been attending a music festival in the desert. Both are still missing. This woman tells BBC she hid in a citrus grove when the gunmen opened fire on the revelers.
And they were just all around me, and they were going tree by tree and shooting everywhere from two sides. And I saw many people were dying, all around.
She was lucky to make it out of the desert party alive, as were these revelers, visibly exhausted, but relieved to be reunited with loved ones. Hundreds of partygoers are among the kidnapped, killed, and missing in Israel. Shani Luke, a German citizen, was abducted at the rave. Her mother is still holding out hope she's alive. We were sent a video in which I clearly recognized my daughter, she said, unconscious in a car with the Palestinians who drove along the Gaza Strip. I am asking for any news or help to please be sent to us. Thank you. In Tel Aviv, parents of abducted Israelis held a press conference, pleading for a meeting with the government to help find their children. Some of those missing were also at the music festival in southern Israel.
Back with our correspondent Rebecca Ritters in Ashkelon. Rebecca, what can Israel do to liberate the hostages abducted by Palestinian militants?
Well, that is certainly going to be a priority for the Israeli military, for the government. They are going to be working, doing everything that they can. At the moment, they've set up a kind of a command center headed up by a major general to collate information and to work out the next steps. They haven't released, obviously, any information as to how they're going to do that. I mentioned before that they were really caught on the back foot in this surprise attack. At the moment, their priority is to try and clear the areas around the Gaza border, the communities there that are still fighting. There are still fighting ongoing in 7 to 8 places, and some hostages still being held there. So that is the main priority as we move into the next phase of this war, which will include the attempt to release those prisoners.
Many, many thanks to Rebecca Ritters.
And I am joined now by Galit Dan. Her home near the border with Gaza in southern Israel was attacked by Hamas fighters on Saturday. She was rescued, but her 12-year-old daughter and her 80-year-old mother, who were staying in a house nearby, are missing, feared kidnapped. Galit, first of all, thank you so much for speaking with us during these incredibly difficult circumstances. And I'd just like to begin by asking you, can you describe to us what happened on Saturday morning?
I can't start describing what happened. It's so complicated. We were attacked. It started with a red color alarm, which is kind of regular. We ran into the room, but the safe room. But very fast we heard shooting. This is the first time in my life I hear shooting from so close. And I heard a fight going on in the kibbutz. I was in kibbutz Kisufim with my 9-year-old daughter and my boyfriend. My big girl, she was in a nearby kibbutz where my mother lives in Nir Oz. The same thing happened there, only they couldn't lock the door of the safe room. We locked it with a kind of a bar. And we could lock the door, so we heard someone trying to open our door, but he couldn't do it. My mom, I asked her, did you lock the door? Did you lock the door? She said yes, but I know she couldn't because there's no way to lock the door. The safe room in Nir Oz, and at 12 in the afternoon I lost contact with them. We were locked in the safe room from 6 in the morning at 3 a.m. when the army came and took us out, with no food, no water, no toilet. And at a certain moment, there was no electricity, and we lost contact and no Wi-Fi. And only at 4 o'clock in the morning, I understood that my homeland, my home kibbutz, was completely destroyed.
And you were on the phone, I understand, with your mother and your 12-year-old daughter, Noya. Can you just walk us through the conversations that were happening during that time period and what you last heard from them?
My mom wrote, "They are entering the house. They are breaking my house. They are looting my house. They are taking things." I told her, "Lock the door." She said, "Okay, I'm locking. And my daughter left me a voice message on WhatsApp. She said, "Mom, there's a lot of noise. There's a big noise outside. I'm very much afraid." Yes, that's what she said, yes. As if she understood something very bad is going on. And
I think I hear in the background, and we know you have a younger daughter.
my young daughter, I have to be strong with. Yes.
What are you telling her? How are you handling this as a family?
First of all, I'm telling her the truth, with not a lot of details, but the truth. Actually, it's not only my mother and my daughter. It's also my nephews and the ex of my sister, and a lot of people from the kibbutz near Oz. A lot of old people and also young people and babies, and we're all taken. We don't know where. We don't hear anything from them and anything from the government. I'm willing to talk with you from Berlin to ask you, please help us to help them. Please help us to save them. We don't know where they are. We don't know what is going on with them, and we need help. We need someone from the international community to go there and to ask the terrorists to release young people and old people, to release the people, the innocent. We need help. I didn't hear from my daughter and from my mom, but I'm doing this fight for them and for everybody who is kidnapped. Please help us. Can you just do something? I don't know. This is what I can do. I can talk to you and tell you this is the Holocaust. What is going on here? We are destroyed. It's not regular.
Could you ever imagine? I mean, because you had a safe house in your home, right? And your mother did as well. And I'm just wondering, you said that you had a lock on your safe room. Your mother didn't. Could you ever have imagined something like this happening? That militants would be going door to door in your neighborhood?
You know, you live in a war area. How can you live in a war area? You just tell yourself everything is okay. The mind can't imagine bad stuff. If you imagine bad stuff, you don't live there. If you and also, I'm talking to you also, so I won't be thinking about what's happening with them. Because if I would start to think and imagine what they are going through, I won't be able to talk, you know? So you live in a war area all the time, and you tell yourself everything will be okay. And then the worst nightmare is becoming true. You know, terrorists came into my home, tried to open the door. My boyfriend, me, and my young daughter, we couldn't breathe. We didn't move. We were scared. And he sat down in our saloon with his gun and shoot everybody who passed from the window, everybody. The soldiers. We heard everything. I can't imagine what is going on with my mom and my daughter and my nephews and all the people from New York. I don't want to imagine it.
Galit Dan, I just want to tell you, we really appreciate you taking this time to speak with us. We know that this is a very difficult time for you, your family, for all in the area who are going through these circumstances. We'll follow up with you. We are hoping for the best for your mother and your daughter, Noya. Thank you so much for speaking with us. We'll be in touch.
I want the world to know what is going on here. Please, I want the world to act, to do something. The UN, the Red Cross, somebody help us. Please do something. If you can talk with Hamas, if you can talk with the soldiers and tell them to release the people, please do that.
Thank you so much for joining us to share that message. All the best to you.
Thank you.
Joining me now is Shani Razanis, DW's Middle East analyst. Shani, whatever one's allegiance might be, these images are shocking. The world is seeing Israelis, including women and children, being dragged away by armed gunmen. Can you speak at all to what the families are going through?
It's complete shock. The whole country is in complete disarray. Everybody knows somebody who's been affected by that. Either a relative who's been kidnapped and captured, somebody who was drafted, somebody who's still missing, somebody who died. I mean, there's complete settlements and communities completely vanished. Rebecca shortly mentioned there's still places, at least 7 or 8 places, where the military is still fighting to get a control over what's happening on the ground. So these places, there are people that have not been heard from for days now. So there's no normalcy in Israel. There's no routine. Everything, everybody, this is the only thing happening, the only priority. And, we are in the age of social media. We are in the age of Telegram. People get their news through these channels, unfiltered. That affects emotionally very much the mindset, the morale, the whole atmosphere, because people also feel that they've not been giving the facts, they're not giving enough information from the official channels, and that's creating more confusion.
And wherever you get your news, people are asking the same question. What can be done to rescue these hostages or to secure their release?
Any ground operation in Gaza is going to be very, very complicated. You got to keep in mind the one thing, the clouding Israeli thought over the last couple of days is the idea that they have lost their confidence in the intelligence. They don't know once they do come into Gaza, which is always a complicated operation Israel has been trying to avoid for as long as possible. But in normal circumstances, when there was trust in the intelligence, that would have been very much a last resort option. Now, considering the fact that there is no trust in the intelligence, considering the fact there are many hostages kept in several places hidden in Gaza, which the Israelis do not very much know where they are, going on the ground and trying to rescue these people, that's a very risky operation. There are talks with the Egyptians on trying to release at least the young kids, the elderly people, sort of a humanitarian gesture by Hamas, because the assumption is that Hamas has got his victory. They got the achievements that they wanted, and maybe they can show some grace, because they also might understand that this might backfire. The world is not looking very fondly of what they're seeing, these photos of civilians. So this is some of what's happening now on the ground.
Let's dive a little deeper into something you were saying just moments ago. These attacks shocked Israel.
Completely.
Has the nation's confidence been more than rattled?
Oh, totally. It's shattered. It's completely shattered.
You're not overstating this.
Oh, not at all. People were left to fend for themselves. Civilians were left as the front line. The Israeli strategy for defense was always A, assuming there'll be intelligence, and B, assuming that the border is uncrossable. And once these two things have collapsed, there's nothing left. There's no plan B, there's no back line. Once the militants have managed to cross, Israelis were left for themselves.
Incredible.
And we're going to get more on the hostage situation. We're just waiting to speak with an IDF spokesperson. We will do that in a short while. In the meantime, we're getting some big picture analysis from Nomi Bar-Yaakov. She is a Middle East advisor at the Policy Institute, Chatham House. Welcome to the program and thank you for joining us. Now, if we look at this attack, it clearly caught Israel's military and intelligence apparatus completely off guard. Who's to blame for this failure in intelligence?
I don't think this is the time to discuss who is to blame for the failure. I think this is the time to work out how to ensure that there isn't going to be a second failure or any further failures. There's undoubtedly going to be a very high level of very serious investigation into the failures as soon as the situation somewhat stabilizes. But I think there's a consensus in Israel that discussing who is to blame at the moment shouldn't really be the focus.
This was such an unprecedented incursion. How much help do you think Hamas got from outside of Gaza?
Oh, I think this is not the sort of operation that Hamas could have carried out without external help.
Iran said, meantime today, that it had no role in the attacks. What do you make of that statement?
Well, I think that their fingerprints are certainly on the attack, and they have a very, very strong relationship with Hamas and with Islamic Jihad. Let's not forget Islamic Jihad is a sort of known proxy of Iran. Hamas is both funded and trained to a large extent by Iran, and I think that we know that Islamic Jihad have announced that they have over 30 hostages in the Strip. We know that Hamas have discussed they have announced that they have over 100, of which they have just announced 4 were killed. 4 Israeli hostages they announced have just been killed in Israeli attacks on Gaza. I'm just quoting what the Hamas spokesperson has said. Israel has not verified this, but the Israelis have announced it in the words of Hamas. So I think to answer your question whether this was a Hamas known operation, one has to look at who funds Hamas, who trains Hamas, where they get their arms from, and certainly some Iranian involvement.
And the United States and others have warned regional players like Iran and Hezbollah not to take advantage of the situation. And I'm wondering how high you see the risk of further escalation regionally.
Well, that's a very good question. So I think we have to divide it into sort of short-term, medium-term, long-term. I think short-term, it's not going to escalate massively in the region imminently in the sort of coming days, because I think Iran and Hezbollah are not going to take the risk of a full Israeli incursion with American support in terms of arms and. So I think we need to just unpack this. I think it's the risk of a regional war is high in the medium-long term, but not imminently.
How about Israel?
We'll wait to see how things unravel in Gaza first. I think they'll wait for the Israeli army to basically invade the Strip and then see how things pan out. I don't think they will be in a rush to invade from the north. But as you know, the head of the Iranian Al-Quds forces is meeting head of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, today, and undoubtedly they will be in a better place to answer your question than me.
Let's talk a little bit more about what indeed comes next in Gaza, because Israel says that it wants to destroy Hamas. How realistic is that aim? What could it mean for the current status quo in Gaza, how it's governed, and also the wider region?
They are not saying they want to destroy Hamas. They're saying very clearly, they're delineating, they would like to destroy Hamas's military capabilities, all of them, and governing capabilities. But they have fallen short, and they have made it very, very clear, Israel, that they do not intend to occupy the Strip and govern 2.2 million Palestinian people. So the question is, How are they going to do it? It's an excellent question. There are no easy answers, but clearly they will focus on military targets and on what Israel calls targeted assassinations that already of the senior military echelon of Hamas. And the idea would be to eventually be able to have a Palestinian entity that Israel could negotiate peace with. And the question is, clearly, this clearly has to be resolved.
Thank you so much.
By which I mean
Palestinian
with
with
Chatham I'm talking
House.
about Fatah and the Palestinian Authority and how they will resolve their relationship with Hamas.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nomi Bar Yaakov with Chatham House. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we are joined now by spokesperson for the Israeli military, Masha Mikkelsen. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to just quickly ask you for your comment on something that has just crossed our wires here. Hamas is saying that 4 Israelis held in Gaza have been killed in Israeli strikes since Sunday. Can you confirm that?
I cannot confirm that. That is very serious claims, and the IDF will look into them. But as of now, we have no information confirming that.
How about
Hamas are known to spread fake information. Yes.
Excuse me. Yeah, thank you very much for that statement. I'd like to ask you also about the security situation within Israel right now. The Israeli army also saying that it's reestablished control of the communities in southern Israel near Gaza, but that there still might be terrorists in the area. How big is the threat posed by Hamas militants inside of Israel at this moment?
So if we try to zoom out of this situation, Saturday, 6:30 a.m. Israel time, we've seen hundreds of terrorists invading Israeli territory unprovoked, and that's what the IDF and the security forces have had to face. From there has been non-stop fighting going on from every point surrounding the Gaza Strip, and right now we have gained control back. It doesn't mean that all the terrorists are out. It means that if we do encounter a terrorist, they're singles or maybe very small groups, and they're met with equipped and prepared military power that engages with them and kills them if they try to harm Israeli civilians.
And what indications do you have about the number of hostages that Hamas might be holding? Have you been receiving any information about them and their well-being?
I'm not the authority to talk about hostages. What I do know is that the numbers are in the dozens, and the IDF had established a situation room with colonels that are in charge of checking the situation and then contacting the families so we can assess how many are actually in there, and then we can put the data out, but we will not do so until all the families are informed and the number is confirmed.
We've heard that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to destroy Hamas, and I'm wondering how much the hostage situation complicates that effort.
When the senior commanders of the IDF present to the political echelon and the security cabinet the military options that are on the table going forward against Hamas, this situation is taken into account. The IDF is the army of a state, a Jewish state, that has always valued human life, and we hold human life sacred as we always did. We will do everything in our power to try to solve the situation with as little hostages killed as possible.
On that note, when we look, the UN, for example, saying that more than 120,000 Palestinians have been displaced in Gaza since the fighting began, and that there have been instances of Israeli airstrikes targeting buildings without prior notice to the civilian residents who live there. What measures is the military taking to minimize civilian casualties as Israel responds to these attacks?
Israel is responding to an unprecedented attack on its civilians. We are looking at numbers and seeing the biggest amount of Jewish people killed in a single day since the end of the Holocaust. We are at war, and war takes different measures than routine times. We are asking the civilians of Gaza, the people that are not involved with terrorists, to move north, to move south, to move east, so that we can strike the military targets of Hamas as orderly as we we can. But we are looking at a terrorist organization that showed its true face to the world Saturday morning. And for all these years, they have been holding the civilians in the Gaza Strip as human shields and entrenching their terrorist infrastructure within civilian population. They have military ammunition storages, command and control centers, CCTV centers, underground, under mosques, under kindergartens, under UN facilities, to make the job of the IDF harder. But we are facing a terrorist organization. We are at war with them, and we will make them pay for the mistake that they have done.
When we're looking at the Israeli response, we've heard and we've seen images of thousands of soldiers on the southern border now with Gaza waiting for the next phase in this war. Can you confirm that an Israeli ground incursion into Gaza is indeed coming?
The IDF is prepared for any order that will come from the Security Cabinet. All military options have been presented.
Spokesperson for the Israeli military, Masha Mikkelsen, thank you.
Hazem Belusha is a journalist based in Gaza. Here's what he told me about the situation there overnight.
Well, last night was really horrible, terrifying. Was the most intense so far bombardment across the Gaza Strip. In my area, we barely could sleep at that. It's bombardment all the time, very high, very loud, very strong. We could hear smashed windows from distant, ambulances sometime, civil defense truck if there was a fire. We could hear the hovering of the Israeli jets over the Gaza Strip, drones all the time, naval missiles from the sea, and some of that in the sea. Seems like Israel is afraid sometimes people might infiltrate through the sea. According to the reports, they were shooting at the main harbor in Gaza. Many places were destroyed overnight. The most intense bombardment was in two places. One in Beit Hanun, it's in the north end of Gaza Strip, and the other one is chhaya, is the eastern part of Gaza City. Many Hamas leader houses were destroyed as well. Some mosques were reported that were destroyed as well. The number of casualties is rising. The initial number, according to the Ministry of Health, overnight 22 at least were killed, dozens were injured, to raise the death toll to over at least 436.
Hashem, is there any place at all that Gazans feel relatively safe at the moment?
Unfortunately not. Gaza is always it's a very small place, field from the border, and it's control. We have the sea in the west, Israel border from the east and north, and Egypt from the south. Egypt is controlling the only gate. Israel is there at the border, and the Arab crossing is closed. Gaza is a very overpopulated places. 2.2 million living in Gaza, and no shortages.
Hazem, conditions have been dire for years in Gaza, and I imagine most residents could only anticipate things getting worse after facing Israeli retaliation for the events on Saturday. How are Palestinians in Gaza feeling about Hamas right now?
Well, this is not, it is very early to judge on that, but what I can say is, I hear from many people, ordinary people, they are terrified, they are afraid, they don't want war. It was out of sudden, all thousands were in shock, as everybody elsewhere. There were no hands on that. I can't say that everybody in Gaza, angry at Hamas, but maybe, Hamas is part of the community. They have population, they have supporters here, and I'm sure that they are happy. But ordinary people who are suffering, and they are exposed to these things and to the bombardment. They are terrified and they are angry and they want this over. And along in the same time, they want the siege to be lifted and to live normally as like elsewhere in the world. We have seen lately like thousands of Palestinians who fled before this, from Gaza to Europe. Many reports were talking about that because they were not happy and they were, looking for a better life.
Okay, that is Hazam Balusha in Gaza. Many thanks. For more on this continuing conflict, I'd like to welcome Myrav Sunshine, Middle East expert at the International Crisis Group, who joins us now from Tel Aviv. There are dozens of Israelis, as we've just seen there, held hostage in Gaza. What do you believe is Hamas's intention here, and how likely is it that Israel will try to free them by force?
Well, I believe this is the harshest Palestinian offensive on Israel in history, as far as the ability of Hamas militants to penetrate Israeli IDF bases and Israeli communities. We've never seen anything like it. And I believe there are several factors involved, primarily the continued siege of Gaza, the abandonment of much of the Arab world of the Palestinian issue, and the notion by Israel that it can continue to maintain this kind of status quo in both the West Bank and Gaza without any kind of negotiated solution. So, desperation is certainly a big factor here. As far as, going forward, it's pretty clear that Israel will do everything in its power to retrieve the captives, and it's still an unfolding situation. We don't even know exactly how many are civilians, although it seems like quite a lot of them are civilians. For Israel, this is a huge blow, and it is now going to have to deal tactically and strategically with how to retrieve them. There are no clear or easy options right now.
Indeed. Myrav, Israel says its goal is to ensure that Hamas ceases to exist after this. It's mobilizing 100,000 reservists. So is Israel preparing for urban warfare in Gaza? And what will that mean for the local population?
Well, for all the populations right now, this looks very, very dire. There are talks of ground invasion. It will be very hard to see how Israel will be able to retrieve those who are captive without some kind of ground invasion. The airstrikes, for example, it's not clear to me how those are going to help retrieve the captives. I believe they're probably underground at this point. I don't think Israel is yet able to assess exactly how it's going to do this. I think it's still, there's still people who are stuck in their shelters on the border communities that Israeli troops are trying to save. So they have several fronts here to deal with, and I think tactically they're trying to respond. What will happen as far as negotiating a prisoner release or how to go forward, that has yet to be seen. But one thing is clear is that it seems like fighting will continue for days, for sure.
That is our Middle East expert Myrav Sunshine in Tel Aviv. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you.
In Lebanon, hundreds of Hezbollah supporters have rallied in Beirut to show their backing for Hamas's attack on Israel. People at the rally, including young children, chanted "Death to Israel" as they waved Palestinian and Hezbollah flags. A senior Hezbollah official told the crowd that the Iran-backed party pledged its support to the Palestinian militants. That's after Hezbollah and Israeli forces exchanged mortar and artillery fire close to Israel's northern border on Sunday, raising fears of a wider conflict. For more, I am now joined by DW Beirut Bureau Chief Mohammed Shreite. Welcome, Mohammed. What's the situation at the Lebanon-Israeli border at this point?
It is looking calm this morning on the Lebanese-Israeli borders. The latest significant development goes back to yesterday afternoon when Hezbollah and the Israeli army exchanged cross-border shelling. No escalation has been recorded since then. Now the question really is, Michael, how long the existing status quo will last on the Lebanese front, and how will Hezbollah react towards the growing escalation in Gaza?
What are Lebanese officials saying about the conflict at the border and any signs that Hezbollah will get involved again?
Well, the caretaker government has been totally silent about the situation. No official statement has been issued so far. As you may know, Lebanon has been through presidential vacuum for nearly a year now. The parliament doesn't meet, and the caretaker government's ability to make decisions or take decisions is very limited. Nevertheless, sources close to Hezbollah said that the message that Hezbollah wanted to send to the Israelis was a limited message. This explains the cautious, calm situation on the borders. The escalation was very calculated and precise. It is so far within the established rules of engagement. However, Lebanese opposition figures expressed fears of escalation and have warned Hezbollah from dragging Lebanon into a war with Israel as the country is reeling from financial and economic crackdown.
Our thanks to DW Beirut Bureau Chief Mohammed Shreite. Here in Germany, there's been a public show of support for Israel, with Berlin's Brandenburg Gate lit in the colors of the Israeli flag on Saturday night. And on Sunday, more than 1,000 people gathered at the gate in the heart of the German capital to show their solidarity. Israel's ambassador to Germany, as well as Berlin's mayor, have spoken at the event. It's just one of several rallies across Germany intended to show support for Israel. The German Foreign Ministry has confirmed that there are German-Israeli nationals among the hostages taken by Hamas. Chancellor Olaf Scholz says Berlin has increased security at Israeli and Jewish institutions within Germany following the attacks. And he said that Germany stands firmly by Israel's side.
The news that reached us from Israel yesterday has shaken us deeply. Hundreds of Israelis have been killed. Terrorists fired thousands of rockets from the Gaza Strip into Israel. At the same time, heavily armed fighters infiltrated Israel. They entered the houses of innocent civilians, indiscriminately murdering men, women, and children, and abducting dozens of hostages into the Gaza Strip. These are barbaric acts. They are shocking, and they cannot in any way be justified. I spoke on the phone this afternoon with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and I assured him, in light of this terrible attack, that Germany stands steadfastly by Israel's side. The security of Israel is a part of Germany's reason of state.
We're joined now by Stephen A. Cook of the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington, D.C. So, Stephen, how exactly could Hamas have prepared and carried out these attacks seemingly without warning?
It is an extraordinary intelligence failure on the part of the Israelis, who were a combination of complacent, distracted by their domestic political turbulence and dealing with violence in the West Bank, where they had moved forces that had previously been on the Gaza border, leaving the Gaza border thinly manned and almost totally dependent on the use of technology to secure it. It seems that in a way that Hamas was taking advantage of all of these things, as well as the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah and the 50th anniversary of the October 1973 war.
Now, do we know, in the context of this current uptick in violence, who exactly is supporting Hamas?
Well, there's ample evidence already emerging that Iran played a role in arming Hamas, and given the kind of quantum leap in Hamas capabilities and the extraordinary change in tactics that they've used, one has to surmise that the Iranians were at least offering them advice. In the days leading up to the attack, Iran's supreme leader was pretty active on social media, threatening Israel and predicting that the Zionist entity, as he called it, was dying. So there is a fair amount of indicators that suggest that the Iranians do and have played a role here, including Hamas's own admission that the Iranians helped to arm them.
Now, with the shadow of Iran looming large in the region, U.S. officials have said Hamas may be trying to disrupt talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia. What exactly do you make of that?
Well, I think that that's right, and it's something else that both Hamas and Iran share, is a desire to halt the normalization of Israel into the region. And of course, the United States has been engaged in intensive diplomacy to try to push forward an agreement between the Israelis and the Saudis that would lead to mutual recognition there. The Iranians have been very open in threatening countries that would embark on normalization. So once again, it speaks to Hamas running cooperation on this issue.
Now, we also know that Egypt is attempting to mediate between Israel and Hamas. Do you think it can actually achieve a ceasefire?
Well, this is a traditional role for the Egyptians. The United States, the Israelis, and others have often looked to the Egyptians to mediate and de-escalate. However, given the number of killed and the number of casualties in Israel, the way in which this attack unfolded that has undermined Israel's deterrence, I think in the short run the Egyptians are not going to meet with any success. The Israelis seem intent on undertaking a very significant military operation. Listening to your lead-in story, I think the movement of armor into the area portends a significant ground invasion of the Gaza Strip.
All right, it does appear that this conflict is going to be staying with us for some time to come. That was Stephen A. Cook with the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington, D.C. Thank you for your analysis.
In Egypt, 2 Israeli tourists and their Egyptian tour guide were shot dead in the port city of Alexandria on Sunday after policemen opened fire on a tour group. The attacker was arrested at the scene. Israel's National Security Council has urged Israelis traveling in Egypt to leave as soon as possible. Egypt normalized ties with Israel decades ago, but anti-Israeli sentiment still runs high in the country. For more, I am now joined by Bahira Amin, AFP journalist in Cairo. Welcome, Bahira. What more can you tell us about this incident? Is there any evidence that this shooting is linked to the Hamas assault on Israel?
Authorities remain very tight-lipped about the events in Alexandria. The area was very quickly cordoned off. We have no further information on the policeman who fired his gun or the third Israeli who was wounded. Local associations of tour guides did identify the Egyptian tour guide, shared condolences. The Israeli Foreign Ministry confirmed the deaths. Israeli authorities have said they were working to pay to the group and possible. There is nothing to indicate a connection or any kind of coordination between the events in Alexandria and the attack launched by Hamas. Egypt, as you said, their state with Israel have established diplomatic relations in 1999. Direct flights run between and Sharm el-Sheikh and the Sinai Peninsula. So Israeli travelers do come to Egypt, but up till now there's no link between what happened in Alexandria and the events in Gaza.
But here we're having slight connectivity issues with you with your audio, but we're going to soldier on for now because we are getting bits of what you're saying, and it is crucial information. What has been the reaction from Egyptian officials at this point?
So again, I'll say that Egyptians remain very tight-lipped. That's not very shocking, considering that any mediation between Palestinian and Israeli officials is a very high-level security matter for Egypt. Egypt and Israel have a long history of robust security collaboration. It's the role that Egypt plays every time violence breaks out is one of mediation, maintains open lines of communication with both sides. And we're already seeing a flurry of correspondence from both the Egyptian president and the foreign ministry trying to rally international support before any kind of mediation.
Got it. That is Bahira Amin, AFP journalist in Cairo. Many thanks.